At first, it looked like a night of unprecedented celebration. But within hours, the grand halls of power were drowned in a sea of despair. The air, once thick with the scent of celebratory wine and blossoms, turned heavy with the stench of death and betrayal. This was supposed to be the dawn of a new era, sealed by a union of love and strategy. Instead, it became the final, tragic chapter in the life of a young woman whose only crime was to be a pawn in a game far more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. Her name was Laodice, a princess whose beauty was matched only by her ambition. And her story is a chilling reminder of the brutal realities that lurk behind the gilded facades of royal courts. She was the daughter of Antiochus, the second Theos, a king of the vast and powerful Seleucid Empire, a sprawling Hellenistic state carved from the conquests of Alexander the Great. Laodice was no mere courtly ornament. She was a woman of sharp intellect and fierce pride, born and bred in the heart of Anatolian power. From a young age, she understood that for a woman of her station, marriage was not a matter of the heart, but a contract of statecraft. Her union with her own cousin Antiochus was a strategic move designed to consolidate power within the Seleucid dynasty, a common practice in an era where bloodlines were the currency of legitimacy. For years, she reigned as his queen, bearing him sons and securing her position as the matriarch of the future dynasty. She was respected, feared, and for a time, she was secure. But in the volatile world of Hellenistic politics, security was a fragile illusion, one that was about to be shattered by the shifting sands of international diplomacy. The Seleucid Empire found itself locked in a protracted and costly conflict with its great rival, the Ptolemaic Kingdom of Egypt. The Second Syrian War had drained the coffers and blood of both empires, and, by 253 BC, a weary truce was sought. The price of peace, however, was to be paid not in gold or territory, but in flesh and blood. Ptolemy II, Philadelphus of Egypt, offered his young daughter, Bernice Pharnaphras, as a bride to Antiochus II. The terms were as humiliating as they were politically astute. Antiochus was to repudiate Laodice, his wife and the mother of his heirs, and declare any children born to Bernice as the sole successors to the Seleucid throne. It was a staggering blow to Laodice's pride and position. In a single diplomatic stroke, she was cast aside, her sons disinherited, and her entire life's work undone. The marriage was hailed as a monumental achievement, a union that would finally bring peace to a war-torn region. For Bernice, young and hopeful, it was the beginning of a grand adventure. For Laodice, exiled to her estates in Ephesus, it was a declaration of war. The wedding was a spectacle of unparalleled magnificence. Bernice arrived in Syria with a dowry so immense, it was said the Nile itself flowed with gold to the Orontes. The people celebrated, hailing her as the bringer of peace. For a few years, it seemed the gamble had paid off. Bernice gave Antiochus a son, cementing the new line of succession and pushing Laodice and her children further into the shadows of history. But Antiochus was a man torn between his past and his present, between his duty to his new treaty and a lingering, complex bond with his first wife. In 246 BC, after a visit to his old territories in Asia Minor, he found himself once again in Ephesus, in the presence of the woman he had publicly shamed. What transpired between them remains shrouded in mystery whispers of rekindled affection, of political maneuvering, of a man weary of his Egyptian queen. Shortly after this reunion, Antiochus II, Theos, the mighty king, was dead. The news of the king's death sent shockwaves through the empire. While the official cause was given as a sudden illness, rumors immediately began to swirl, dark and venomous. All eyes turned to Ephesus, to the spurned queen Laodice. Had she poisoned him? Had she coerced him into naming her son Seleucus as his heir on his deathbed before conveniently disposing of him? The truth died with the king, but Laodice did not wait for it to be debated. She acted with a speed and ruthlessness that stunned her enemies. This was her moment, the chance to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. She immediately had her eldest son, Seleucus II, proclaimed king in Ephesus, securing the loyalty of the Anatolian heartland. But one enormous obstacle remained: the Egyptian queen, Bernice, and her infant son, the child who legally stood as the heir to the entire empire. They were in the capital, Antioch, a city far from Laodice's center of power. What happened next was not a battle of armies, but a clandestine war fought in the shadowy corridors of the royal palace. Bernice, realizing the mortal danger she was in, barricaded herself and her child within a fortified section of the palace in Antioch. She sent frantic messages to her brother in Egypt, Ptolemy III, begging him to come to her aid. She was a queen under siege in her own capital, surrounded by courtiers whose loyalties were shifting like desert sands. Laodice's agents, however, were already inside the city, their instructions chillingly clear. The rival queen and her son must not be allowed to live. The events of that fateful night unfolded with the grim finality of a Greek tragedy. Under the cover of darkness, assassins loyal to Laodice infiltrated the supposedly secure royal apartments. The ensuing scene was one of chaos and butchery. Bernice's loyal Gallic bodyguards fought desperately to protect their queen, but they were overwhelmed. According to the historical accounts of Justin, the young queen fought with desperate courage, but it was futile. She and her infant son were brutally murdered, their bodies unceremoniously disposed of. The wedding night that had promised peace had culminated, years later, in a night of blood-soaked regicide. The aftermath was immediate and catastrophic. When Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, arrived with the Egyptian army, he found not a sister to be rescued, but a murder to be avenged. The news of the slaughter of the Egyptian princess and her child ignited a firestorm of rage. Ptolemy III launched a massive invasion of the Seleucid Empire, sparking the Third Syrian War, a conflict that would become known as the Laodicean War. His campaign was wildly successful. He swept through Syria and Babylonia, conquering vast swathes of Seleucid territory and even capturing the capital, Antioch. For a time, it seemed Laodice's bloody gamble would cost her everything. As the Ptolemaic forces exacted a terrible revenge for their slain princess, the war raged for years, draining the Seleucid Empire of its wealth and stability, a direct consequence of the palace coup. Laodice, the architect of the tragedy, eventually faded from the historical record. Her own fate uncertain, likely consumed by the very chaos she had unleashed. This brutal tale of a wedding meant to heal an empire and a betrayal that tore it asunder has echoed through millennia. It stands as a stark testament to the precarious position of royal women in the ancient world. They were simultaneously revered symbols of fertility and dynastic continuity, and disposable assets in the cold calculus of power politics. Laodice and Bernice were two sides of the same coin. One, a queen cast aside for political expediency, the other, a princess used as a bargaining chip, both ultimately victims of a system that saw them as instruments rather than individuals. Their story is more than just a palace intrigue. It is a profound commentary on the nature of power, the ferocity of a mother's ambition, and the devastating human cost of the great games played by kings and empires. It reminds us that behind the grand tapestries of history, behind the treaties and the wars, are deeply personal stories of love, loss, and the bloody struggle for survival.